Hello everyone, welcome to another lecture of general medicine where I make another topic easy to read which is already dreadful for you. And if you are someone who likes to read from pictorial representations and does not like to read boring textbooks, then you must refer to this mind map book by MediStudy Go. This is a book which they've created and it contains all the pictorial representations for difficult topics of medicine, be it cardiovascular system, GI tract, etc. etc. You do not need to go through endless books to find material, just one book and you will get everything in one place. So do refer to this book for creating an easier task during revision. So let's get started with today's topic. A topic which is based on GI system, that is the gastrointestinal system, and is something which is a chronic disease where the patients complain of persistent acidity and they might also have ulcers. So this disease is the peptic ulcer disease. Let's get into our lecture. As I always say, every topic must be studied under some respective headings. So starting with the first heading for peptic ulcer disease, which is definition, it is defined as a condition characterized by open sores or ulcers, which can happen in the stomach or in the duodenum as well. So now we know that after the esophagus, there is stomach, and after the stomach, the duodenum starts. So duodenum has 4 parts, and this peptic ulcer disease is a condition which affects the stomach and the first part of the duodenum. So the location of peptic ulcer disease is a characteristic place of duodenum's first part and the stomach. It usually occurs at the portion of the GI tract which is exposed to acidic gastric juices. So that is mostly in the stomach and some part of duodenum because the food is just traveling from the stomach towards the intestine. So that area also has gastric acid being present. The most common site is the antrum and the first part of duodenum, as I've already told you. Now, when we know the definition of something, we know what are we talking about. The next step which we must know is why is this happening, which is the etiology. So moving to the etiology of peptic ulcer disease, the first and the most common etiology is H. pylori infection, which is Helicobacter pylori. It is seen in 60 to 70% of cases because this microorganism is responsible for getting attached to the gut mucosa, and somehow it has a pathophysiology which increases the gastric acid secretion in the gut or in the stomach, and that leads to ulcer formation. We'll be discussing the pathophysiology in detail in the next section. Coming to the next cause is Zollinger Ellison syndrome. In this syndrome, a tumor is present in the gastrointestinal tract which produces gastric acid. So if a secondary thing is producing acid besides the normal production also, obviously the gastric acid in the system will increase. And any acid increasing in the body will have its repercussions, which is the form of ulcers. So this leads to peptic ulcer disease. Next, there can be NSAID-induced peptic ulcer disease. A patient which is having or taking NSAIDs for a long term for any sort of pain can also disrupt the mucosa of the gastric system and thereby cause peptic ulcer disease. Lastly, there can be irritants like alcohol and cigarette which also disrupt with the mucus of the stomach and can lead to an increased acid production, thereby leading to peptic ulcer disease. So if you see the pathophysiology or the etiology, there are 2 main things which lead to an ulcer. Firstly, the peptic ulcer disease happens when there is an imbalance between the aggressive and the defensive factors responsible for the ulcer disease to be there. The aggressive factors include NSAIDs, alcohol, smoking, H. pylori, or any tumor. If these factors increase, there will be peptic ulcer disease. Secondly, the defensive factors include mucus, bicarbonate, which is present, and regular or a controlled way of acid secretion, and prostaglandins. So these factors, if they are high in amount, they will save the mucosa. But if these decrease, then the aggressive factor will have a more effect on the mucosa and that will lead to peptic ulcer disease. So these are the 2 main points which lead to a disease when either of these goes down or up and the imbalance happens. Now, after we know why a disease is happening, we need to know what a disease looks like. That is the clinical features of the disease. There can be two types of ulcers. As we know, we have studied two locations, the stomach and the duodenum. So either there can be ulcers in the stomach or there can be ulcers in the duodenum. So that is gastric ulcer and duodenal ulcers. Both do share some common features, but some characterization is present which will help you to differentiate between the occurrence of these two if any patient reports. So what are the clinical features of gastric ulcer? It leads to epigastric pain, that is pain in the abdomen. So there can be aching and burning sensation because of high acidic content. The patient complains of belching and dyspepsia. Belching is a feeling of acidity or a acidic odor from your mouth. When you are breathing, you feel like you are breathing acid. So there is smell from your mouth. And dyspepsia means there is indigestion or a feeling of heaviness in your abdomen. So that is dyspepsia. Also, the patient can complain of tarry stools because there can be ulcers which can open up and they can cause bleeding. And that blood present in the stool will form tarry stools, which indicates bleeding ulcers and a severe situation. Whereas for duodenal ulcers, they can be bloating, they can be vomiting, and there can be loss of appetite. So these are the clinical features which differentiate gastric ulcers from duodenal ulcers. Before we study the difference between the gastric and the duodenal ulcers further, I'm going to tell you the pathophysiology of the formation of ulcers or the formation of peptic ulcer disease. So as we studied the aggressive and the defensive factors, including these, the pathophysiology rotates. So coming to pathophysiology, the first and the most common pathophysiology which I told you is H. pylori. So if H. pylori does enter the gastric system via the oral cavity, it adheres to the gastric mucosa with the help of adhesins. They help in the adhesion to the host cell. Now once the microorganism has adhered to the gastric mucosa, it releases urease. This urease enzyme breaks down urea into ammonia. This is a normal reaction which we study where urea is converted to ammonia by the action of urease enzyme. So the urea gets converted to ammonia and this ammonia helps in neutralization of the acidity present in the gut. Now you must be thinking that this is beneficial. How is this causing damage to the mucosa? So this neutralized acidity helps colonization of H. pylori. The flagella, it aids in chemotaxis by which the microorganism gets attached permanently to the mucosa with the help of proteins which help it adhere to the mucosa. So the neutralized acidity is actually a favorable environment for H. pylori to grow in. So the acidity is not really helping us. What happens next is that when the microorganism has attached to our mucosa, using the type 4 secretion system, it causes disruption of these cells and causes excess production of gastric acid. So imagine a cell is closed, but a bacteria comes, sits on it and tells it to burst and release more of acid. So this will cause an increased gastric acid in the stomach, leading to all the symptoms which we have studied and creation of peptic ulcer disease. So this is the number one etiology wherein H. pylori enters the GI tract via oral route and adheres itself to the gastric mucosa with the help of adhesins. Then it secretes enzyme urease which produces ammonia from the urea and raises the pH levels around the bacteria. This causes a favorable environment and neutralization of the acid which helps in the colonization of H. pylori, and it injects toxins into the host cells, thereby causing an increased gastrin release. This toxin disrupts the cellular signaling, leading to inflammation and increased gastrin, thereby causing chronic ulceration and the formation of peptic ulcer disease. After the first main etiology of peptic ulcer disease, the second is mucus or acid. So if more acid and less mucus is present, it leads to erosion of the mucosa, and that will cause peptic ulcer disease. Third cause is NSAIDs. Now NSAIDs are something which work to decrease the pain, and they decrease pain by decreasing prostaglandins. Now prostaglandin is an enzyme which is responsible for the production of mucus. If prostaglandin decrease, so obviously mucus will decrease, and if mucus decreases, it means the lining of the stomach is absent and the acid will attack on the lining of the stomach and cause the formation of ulcers. and this will lead to peptic ulcer disease. So these are the three main processes by which peptic ulcer disease happens in the body depending on the irritant or the etiology. Now, once we know that peptic ulcer disease is present, we need to differentiate between gastric ulcer and duodenal ulcer. The main differentiating factors include, first and the foremost is the site. Gastric ulcer is present along the lesser curvature of the stomach, whereas duodenal ulcer will be present in the first part of duodenum, obviously suggested by the name. The incidence of both of these is that duodenal ulcer is more common. In the age, if we see, so gastric ulcer is seen in a higher age group, like in the 6th decade, and both of these are more common in males, maybe because of irritating factors like alcohol, smoking, high acidic content food, etc. Then association with H. pylori, gastric ulcers are less commonly associated, but duodenal ulcers are strongly associated with H. pylori. The acid level is high for duodenal ulcer because that is the junction where the food is moving into the intestine, and it is highly acidic at that moment. The relationship of pain. Gastric ulcer, the relief of pain is not consistent and the food aggravates the pain. Whereas with duodenal, the food relieves the pain because that is like soothing the acidity. Then night pain is common in duodenal ulcers and heartburn is also common. Whereas hematomesis is more common in gastric ulcers and vomiting is common in gastric ulcer. So these are some features which differentiate gastric from duodenal ulcer, thereby showing that not both are same, but the pathophysiology stays the same, which are the three main causes and the processes by which peptic ulcer disease really does occur. After we know the differences and the etiology, the clinical features and the pathophysiology, we know that this disease is peptic ulcer disease. So now we need to investigate and we need to form a confirmatory diagnosis before we move towards treatment. So the diagnosis is made by, first and the foremost is upper GI endoscopy, wherein imaging is done of the upper GI tract and looked for any ulcers or any bleeding ulcers and the amount of ulcers which are present. Then you can do an endoscopic ultrasonography, wherein an ultrasound is taken and all the organs are assessed for wherever the damage has occurred, and also to rule out any presence of soft tissue tumor like the Zollinger Ellison as we studied. Then we do a test for H. pylori being present. We do a stool test, a urea breath test. We check IgG antibodies because if any microorganism is present in the body's reaction will be to increase the antibodies. And we do a culture and PCR test to see if which bacteria and which strain of the bacteria is present. Then we do serum gastrin levels because these will be highly raised, especially in Zollinger Ellison syndrome. And we do normal blood tests like CBC and electrolytes to just nullify and to remove any cause which can be because of blood, or it can also show in the blood if any infection is present. After we know which disease is there, we move on to the treatment. The first and the foremost treatment of any disease is to remove the cause. Remove the etiology, remove the irritant, and that will do half the treatment. Next treatment is symptomatic relief. A patient is complaining of acidity, heartburn, severe acidic content is present. So the first thing is to give antacid, which is for quick relief. Example, magnesium hydroxide. These, they nullify or they neutralize the acidic pH. Second is histamine receptor antagonist or H2 antagonist. These work by decreasing the acid secretion. Example, cimetidine, ranitidine, etc. Third are the proton pump inhibitors, which are also the drug of choice. These inhibit the H plus and the K plus pump, which is responsible for the production and the secretion of acid. So if the pump is blocked, the acid will not be there, and this is the most important treatment in cases of drug. Example, pantoprazole, rabiprazole, omeprazole, etc. Next, moving towards a more radical treatment will be surgery. If the mucosa is ulcerated and beyond repair, we need to remove the ulcerated mucosa, because if it will keep bleeding, the patient will feel pain, there will be blood in the stools, the metabolism will be disrupted, so that needs to be removed with surgery. Now, if we know the cause is H. pylori, we need some antibiotic course to be given. So we can give a triple or a quadruple therapy, which can include a proton pump inhibitor, bismuth, metronidazole, and tetracycline. So it will be a combination of antibiotics along with drugs responsible to decrease the acid secretion. Lastly, these ulcers can happen because of stress as well, because stress increases acidity in our body, because the body is in a danger state. The body wants to fight, but it is in a danger state and it increases acid production, thereby causing ulcers. So stress management must also be done. Now, what are the complications if this disease is left as is, or the treatment is not done sufficient, or the patient doesn't comply with the treatment? First and the foremost is that upper GI bleed can happen. If this is the stomach, the acid is present over here. Here, there can be bleeding because of ulcers. And the patient can have vomiting with blood, or the patient can have stools with blood. Then there can be some perforation of ulcer, which is if an ulcer is being poked and provoked again and again, this ulcer is going to burst and it is going to bleed. So there is going to be perforation of ulcer. Then all of this, if ulcers are present, there can be obstruction of the gastric tract. Gastric outlet obstruction can be present. And rarely the benign ulcers can transform into malignant ones if the acid is being put on them again and again. If there's a smooth mucosa, the acid is acting upon it again and again, it will convert from a squamous lining to a columnar one and convert from a benign entity to a malignant one. That is something which we don't want. Therefore, we must educate the patients regarding acidity, because acidity is thought to be a very common disease or a common thing, not even a disease. Patients don't consider it to be a disease. Therefore, being aware is important, and then taking the adequate steps to prevent any further complications is also required. I hope you understood this topic nicely. And before I leave you guys, I'm going to give you 2 questions as we always do. The first is a flashcard, and you can solve many more flashcards like these on our app by MediStudy Go. The flashcard is most common microorganism associated with peptic ulcer disease. I'm sure we'll never forget this answer. It's H. pylori. So what benefit do flashcards give? It is just that you have a question in front of you, no answer, no cheating. You train your brain to think about the answer, and when you flip over, you actually get satisfied if the answer is correct. And you can always remember if the answer is wrong, write it down somewhere and come back at it and get it revised later on. Secondly, if you're preparing for an entrance exam like NEET, solving MCQs is a key part of your practice and of your preparation. So an MCQ which I can give you for this topic is hematomesis in PUD indicates what? So hematomesis means there's blood. It means there is a bleeding ulcer. Obstruction is not hematomesis, it's called a stricture. Perforation is something being ruptured, and healing ulcer can obviously not cause bleeding. So hematomesis is when there is a bleeding ulcer. Secondly, if you want to read such more mind maps on all the topics of our BDS subjects, then you can log on to our app, find the mind maps, notes, videos, flashcards, and even MCQs for various topics, all which you can purchase in the app itself by free coins which you get. So you must try watching out for our app, use it in your mobile phones, it's very convenient, and do use these tools because they're too good for the preparation. If you like our videos, do subscribe us because we'll be sharing all the subjects eventually. Do like this video and drop your comments below this video for any doubts you have, any queries or suggestions you want to give, and we'll get back to you. I hope this video was useful. Keep looking out for more videos. If you want to view more such videos, don't forget to subscribe our channel, like this video, drop your comments below this video for any doubts you have, and we'll reach out to you. Happy studying!